Saturday, the 13th of December, there will be a mass protest in London against digital ID. Digital ID is already being rolled out by most Western governments, but especially by the UK government. I interviewed Fiona Rose Diamond, organiser of Saturday's protest, and asked her why people power mattered and why non-compliance has to be our response to digital ID.
And I'll get onto this in a minute because I don't want people to think that I actually see that as any kind of power at all. Parliaments, governments.
No.
But yeah, so
democracy has long since died. In fact, did it ever really exist? I think, the events of the last 5 years makes us question the whole basis of so-called democracy and political parties. And they all jockey for position. And, we had it recently relating to the Chancellor's speech and the budget and so on about, Kemi Badenoch asking questions in the House of Commons, and it just came across as absolute horseshit. There was no basis of any real division between the two political parties. And, and of course, in terms of digital ID, all of the political parties, including Reform, seem to be very cool about the whole thing. They seem to be working towards the same end game. One group maybe is aligned with the globalists, but the other group, like Trump and JD Vance, seem to be aligned with the technocrats who seem to be forging ahead with digital ID programs and mass surveillance.
Yeah, I mean, going back to, I think the beginning of this year, there was a day of reflection, I believe they called it, to remember those who died and suffered during the pandemic and died of COVID, whilst ignoring the injured and bereaved. It was at the beginning of this year that I felt like I used to say that was, the biggest crime against humanity, ever in human history, was that jab rollout. I didn't think that. It's hard, actually, because I knew that there was obviously more to come. But when you research and you read and you look into what's going on with digital ID, where it's come from, its roots, the architects, you realise the fight that we're up against now is nothing like what we were up against, I think, previously. And I think when we get into conversation about the government, it was actually Dr. Mike Yeadon, that I was sat with in January of this year. And I was so focused on wanting to talk about the toxic injectables, and Mike was so focused on wanting to speak about digital ID. And at the time I was like, no, but I my job is this now. That was like, I sort of pigeonholed myself to that thing because I felt so much compassion and empathy, and I just, what they've done, what the government, what the globalists have done to these people that they don't care about, and the injuries they've sustained and the loved ones they've lost. And then I started, right, now I need to look into this. I need to do my research, because I'm not someone that speaks on things before I have at least done a little bit of due diligence. And I realise, sat here now talking to you after starting that research back in, really deep diving, like I say, we know surface level what's going on, back in May, June time. And then I realised I have to wrap up that campaign, and I have to put my all into this fight against digital ID, because it's not just digital ID. It's not just about this verification, this digital identification, like this version of you on your phone. It's not just that. So the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know, which I hope a lot of people do say, because it's overwhelming, the amount of information, and it's scary. And I do have faith that we will prevail in this, but it will be harder than anything else we have faced before.
Yes.
And when it comes to the government, any government, Parliament, Westminster, the executive, MPs, Starmer, none of them are in control. And they are simply following globalist diktat from lots of different places. And, what we're seeing is being bankrolled, the likes of Rockefeller, BlackRock, Vanguard. And then you've just got, when you see the destination, you can map out the journey, and the stops might change. But the point is, the government aren't in control. They are just puppets. They've got strings attached to them, as do most of the public, to be honest. People need to look up. and we don't have much time. So this is my investment in this now is total. This is my new dedication for however long it goes on. Yeah.
Well, good for you. The other thing that I should say about the meeting in Stormont, and it relates to, you were there obviously in relation to the vaccine injury, but it was coincident with the fact that there was a consultation relating to the so-called public health bill that was out of consultation in Northern Ireland. But that saw such a massive groundswell of public opinion against the proposed legislation that, in fact, we significantly impacted the path of that legislation through Stormont. It was significant as well because the bill was essentially going to be a beta test for similar legislation that was going to be enacted in other parts of the United Kingdom. So my reason for being in Stormont that day was really because Paul Frew invited me, but particularly in terms of the public outcry relating to that particular piece of legislation. And it was quite astonishing. Thousands of consultation responses to the legislation. And in the end, just a few weeks ago, the health minister admitted that the legislation had been taken off the statute book, essentially. So they're not proceeding with it. But it does show the power of protest. And I think you're absolutely right. A lot of people say, well, there's no point just going out onto the streets. But there is a point in getting people, individuals, engaged. And often the best way to get them engaged is to have a point of focus. And that neatly, hopefully, gets us to the conversation that we're having today relating to your event on the 13th of December.
Yeah.
What is the purpose? I know you had a previous protest march, but I think perhaps the argument against digital ID has become more nuanced since then, because we now know, of course, that digital ID is very much a work in progress. It's been happening probably for the last 2 decades. And while the Starmer government is focusing particularly on these so-called digital ID cards, the process of digital identification and surveillance has been an ongoing project. So what's the focus going to be on the 13th of December? And who are the speakers going to be? And I know you don't want to disclose the route that you're taking, but you're assembling at 1 o'clock on the 13th of December at the BBC. Is that correct?
Yeah, BBC Portland Place at 1 p.m. Central London, which, Oxford Circus is the closest tube. And we will be marching and protesting because I do believe there's power in that. And before I go into detail about the 13th, I think going back to your point about there's power in protest and pushing back legislation. Because legislation, whether we like it or not, whether it's lawful or not, it is their tool to implement their agenda, and it's drip fed into the system, into the legislature. And I'm a law student as well, and I think people then look at me and think, well, you must know everything about that. No, I don't. You barely scratch the surface in your first year. I'm now in my second, so I'm learning a little bit more about how things work. I obviously have done my own research prior to this, so I wasn't completely ignorant of how it worked. But people can push back on legislation. And I think it's important then that why there's voices like inside those places, like Paul Frew. And I think Darren Ansell had a hand in that, working with I never remember the name of the barrister, with regards to that legislation that you were talking about. And that happened because people made people aware that it was being pushed through. People campaigned about it, spoke about it, did videos about it, made sure that the public was aware and protested about it. That has to happen because it delays, it knocks it back. And I think we did the same thing back in 2021, November 21. We'd swelled the campaign against vaccine passports, which were obviously at the time for access to prove you had your COVID jab. And we pushed back. We relentlessly campaigned about it for probably 9 months. But the protest itself, that was the tipping point, was because the numbers were so colossal. And as we had petitions delivered to number 10. So lots of people came together to do different things. And the protests, you've got to show that you are a credible threat, and you're a credible threat when there's numbers, and you're demonstrating the sentiment of the UK. Really, we can look at the petition. 3 million people signed it, and those things are great to demonstrate the sentiment of how people really feel. But people are so disenfranchised; they've lost so much faith in the power of their own voice, that people are made to believe that they can't affect change. You did that. We've done that here. We did it with the NHS jab mandates. So this discussion about protest itself and protest working, I will never, ever be convinced ever that it doesn't work. There's too many people who have their own subjective view of what they believe somebody else's protest is trying to achieve. It's not always to influence government and legislation. It's not always for that. Although I think it's been a big part of it over the last 5.5 years. We have proven that we've pushed things back. But, you know, the Online Harms Bill passed because they need that bill to enable what's going to come next. Now we've seen the Data Use and Access Act made law, which gives them further powers to create further legislation, which will bring about the infrastructure for digital ID. It's already there.
Yeah. So, and there was did you see the announcement today relating to the enhanced rollout of facial recognition cameras?
Everywhere. And I think where biometrics come into it as well is a massive part of the conversation, because people don't understand with the digital ID, it's not just say you scan your driver's license onto your phone and you're looking at it, you think I've got a version there, you know, it's on my phone, it's my driver's license. We know that they're trialing the digital driver's license now on the UK Gov Wallet. On the 17th of October, they rolled out the veterans card on there to their test base of veterans, who are always the ones they experiment on. So they've done that, and but digital ID will be tied to biometrics as well, your iris, your face, your fingerprint, and that will all be necessary and needed in order to have that on your Gov Wallet. And then obviously connected to all those surveillance cameras. They've already used people's passport photos. You know, Big Brother Watch, I think, did a big investigation on this, where they've been using people's data to identify who they think are potential criminals walking around London. Facial recognition has existed in London predating like 2020, certainly around Westminster. We've always known they've had like very heavy surveillance. In fact, it was used against me when I was tried in a court, and, you know, a little square around my face. Is that you? I'm like, well, yeah, it's a 4K camera. It's like a 360 camera. Of course it's me. Like, I wasn't denying being there. I think the point that they missed, I'm glad that I went out and broke the rules because of this invisible threat, was, and I'm glad that I rallied the troops and got boots on the ground to stand up. So protest works in a sense that we weren't given our freedom. In July of, 2020, they sort of softened the lockdown restrictions. That wasn't because they'd done such a good job with, masking people, because they implemented masks. And then a year later, such a good job of jabbing the country. It was, they knew that they needed to soften it. We do have an effect, a positive effect, and we can change it. And that's what people need to understand. Now, with the 13th of December, and I won't say where we're marching to, but the 13th of December is, once again, going back to what I said about the fact that I've seen it as my role from the beginning to platform the credible, authoritative voices on this issue, or on any issue I campaign about. That you need an expert speaking, but to the people, not to their peers. It needs to be translated so it's digestible, but they need to be there either in person or connecting with us on the screen to share a message that needs to be heard. You've got that captive audience of people, and everything that's seen globally, worldwide afterwards. It's about. This is going to have what's it called, a ripple effect. So Phil Wiseman will be covering it. I'm sure people have heard of Oracle Films.
Right. But fabulous. Phil, yeah, and such brilliant work over the years. Such regard for Phil.
Yes, and so many people think that they're this massive media company, and when they started, it was like a two-man band, literally two of them. For the last few years, it's been Phil. Phil Wiseman has been that he is Oracle, yeah, and his work, and again, his research is impeccable. The film The Agenda with Mark Sharman, produced with Mark Sharman, who's obviously ex-Sky, again, a credible guy and experienced, producing something that's cinematic. People, that makes it credible. It's not just it's very, very well produced, very well done, with all the information you basically need in it. Because of that, you can imagine how much research Phil Wiseman had to do in order to know what needed to be included in that film. And he is a voice, I think. People need to listen to people like Phil, because he's done the research and he tells me things. And I'm like, oh, I'm so intimidated by that and overwhelmed by the amount of documents there are to still read. I've got hundreds of documents to read. Open on my laptop, one by one, I go through, try and translate them, and then put them out in a digestible format. So that's a lot what this protest is about, because it is a protest. You can tell that the police aren't keen on it, because not so much the rally. They don't know what's going to be said. They don't know who's speaking. There's a reason I keep things under wraps. I have dealt with far too many situations where I have been almost arrested before anything's even happened, and then worried about arrest throughout the entire thing. And I don't care about arrest at the end. But it's such a fear for me that will happen. And I've made it quite clear that we are pulling back the curtain on the architects, on the globalists that are pulling the strings of the government, exposing them, their plan, their agenda, because the only way we're going to win this war, which I think is the most important battle, it's the most important thing that in the last 5.5 years, I think that I've done, and that we are facing, humanity is facing. So people need to understand, they need to know their enemy, know their plan in order to know how to fight it. So the reason that people and speakers and a stage is so important is to get that message out in an incredible way, because I always like to do something quite different, but I also like protesting and marching, and I like, walking down the street with thousands and thousands of people behind, all with that one message. The difference now is the public are on board.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that you have been very successful in building momentum behind this, and I interviewed Abby Roberts this morning. She made, she's published a book, which essentially is a memoir, but also a memoir really of the last 5 years of madness. And she did a call out and made reference to the fact that you were doing some brilliant work, and largely unrewarded. Personally, I know that when we put ourselves out like this, it's not the best way to make an income or live in palatial accommodation in central London. So more credit to you. And I and Abby and others who are watching from afar sometimes hold you in very high regard. And I want to wrap up this conversation, because we have a key message to get across. Obviously, we want as many people as possible from London and the surrounding area, and even further afield, to come to London on the 13th. Maybe you could lean back and show the web address and tell us a little bit more about how people get involved on the day, and how you're hopefully building up a big protest for the day as well.
Well, my aim from this campaign from the beginning, massnoncompliance.com, obviously, it says what it is on the tin. The way out of this, obviously, is massnoncompliance.com. And is Mass Noncompliance. But I wanted it to be a one-stop shop for, how to resist, how to inform yourself with all the information there, with documents translated for digestible, including legislation, so people could understand what they were fighting. I really wanted it to be, and I'm quite behind on it, because I've like I said, the information is overwhelming, and I've barely even scratched the surface. I'm the tip of the iceberg still. Even when you unwrap beyond, Labour, sorry, not really in charge. Labour Together, you look at the brick card proposal, then you've got the Tony Blair Institute. That is literally the most surface level you can get. And then obviously beneath that, you've got your United Nations, World Economic Forum, ID 2020, all these different organizations that are involved in bankrolling this and making this happen. So I wanted that information to be there, accessible for people for free, not behind a paywall, nothing is there to sign up. I'm not even taking emails. I don't even expect people to sign up to get certain information. I'm against that sort of thing. So I don't do any kind of like data collection in that way. It's all there as a resource available for free with a resist guide on how you can resist starting now, because we need to be resisting every day. You could do 3-4 things a day to resist this. On the 18th of October, when we protested, which obviously I announced at the beginning of August. Right, I'd read the BRIC card proposal. I'd read lots of other stuff. I know about sort of Rockefeller, the United Nations SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, of which digital ID for all is one, 16.9. So we knew what was coming, but it was definitely the time to do it. And then nobody really paid attention to it unless you were in the know on the inside or part of the freedom movement, which has exploded outside what it was in 2020 to 22. I think it's changed drastically. But because of that, no one paid attention until Keir Starmer, made this statement that you will need to have mandatory digital ID to work and to rent. Like, it had to be said by him for anyone to pay attention. It had to be in the headlines to put it into the masses, the consciousness, to get them to sit up and pay attention. So that was almost like free promotion. You know what I mean? I could not believe, I expected it to be smaller. I was invited onto Sky News live on the morning of the protest on the 18th. The media coverage afterwards, and we were joined, we only had several thousand. Even when I left from Marble Arch and sort of stood there for a bit, we only had a few thousand, and we must have ended with over, 10, 15,000 people. We were joined by people because they agree with us. Our message was so clear. We don't want a digital ID. So on the 18th of October, it was incredible. The mainstream media coverage afterwards was, again, they're on side. Okay, I don't think they can be any other way. It would be too transparent if they said, oh no, it's a really good idea. But the point is, we're not asking the government or petitioning the government or begging the government to please change and to please not do it. If you know where it's come from and this decades old plan that's written down, if you know what it really means, you'll know that's not what you're really fighting. What we're taking on now, the thousands and thousands of people that I hope turn up on Saturday the 13th, they will know what they're fighting. By the time they leave, they'll know exactly who their enemy is, and they'll feel empowered and inspired to go out into their communities and empower, educate, and inspire other people. That's what I want to achieve on that day. I am platforming, I don't know when this is going to come out, but I am platforming authoritative voices like Whitney Webb, Catherine Austin Fitts. We do have some other speakers who will be standing alongside each other to send that message that no matter ideology, religion, faith, race, politics, it doesn't matter what side you are on or what you identify, whether you're right wing, left wing, whatever. We're standing together against this issue because this is coming for us all. It does not care who you vote for, digital ID. It does not care who you pray to. And people are quite distracted with certain things. Immigration, the arguments and arguments about politics and the fact that Nigel Farage should be voted in and da-da-da-da-da. You'll be arguing about that in a digital gulag if you don't stop the actual blood of the machine that's going to dominate digitally your entire life, all things. You won't have any freedom at all. Everything is controlled, everything is known, everything is based on permission. That's what we're facing, and it's again in lockstep with global governments all over the world because they're following diktat from the NGOs and the unelected, bureaucratic, unaccountable organizations and individuals who are completely sinister. We need people to see, and you can tell, I'm sorry, I'm not frustrated, I'm just passionate because we don't have long. And there won't be any off-grid nice living or getting out of this on a technicality because mandatory doesn't mean law. The legislation is coming, and whether we like it or not, that's how they implement and enforce their laws. And I have faced this in trying to organize this protest. And I don't know what Tommy Robinson is facing right now because he's just announced his on the same day. Again, I feel like I'm treated very differently than any other protester organizer because of what I've achieved to date and the numbers that we get and what we're actually standing up against.
Listen, Fiona, I wish you the very best. I hope you don't get arrested. well, maybe hide as long as possible. Wear dark
Yeah, well,
glasses as well.
this is not exactly discreet, is it? But usually, I've my front line, my amazing on the day team. We talked about before. They don't know anything. Don't go up and ask them anything because they don't know. So if anyone's coming and they go, "Oh, where are we going? What are we doing?" They just won't know because I don't even tell my on the day team. But my volunteers they don't get paid. No one gets paid. Like, I'm doing this again. I have a fundraiser going, which I've not been able to get in time in order to pay for all of my equipment. So I'm having to borrow about £5,000. So personally, I'll be in debt for this, and I'm hoping that obviously I can pull it in. I've spent my own money. I'm a full-time law student. I don't have a normal job. I'm unemployable because of my convictions over the last 5.5 years. I've got 8 because of all this. And yeah, I'm not I'm not employable, so I can't do the things that other people can do, and I don't ever push my name, my profile out there and raise money on my website is entirely for free. So if people feel so inclined to donate to the Buy Me a Coffee, which is in the bio on my Twitter, which is Coffee Leaks, if you don't mind sharing the link, I'd very much appreciate it.
I'll share your Twitter link and obviously your website link and details of the protest as well.
Yeah,
on the post.
We do have, I've got loads of different things planned. People will leave, they won't leave feeling depressed. It's inspiring. That's the point, is we need to educate, empower and inspire. And I don't know how many more I can do. I don't know, because I just think this is so important. People need to be going out into their own communities, taking responsibility for their own knowledge. You need to read. People need to read their plans. They need to. You're not going to get fed this on podcast after podcast. You're going to get a lot of information in that, but please read the information that's on the website. And I have probably only got about 3% of what's actually going to come. But this is my focus, aside from my law studies and general life, which never seems to be simple for me. And it is really hard for me to organize these things, because I do it alone. I do it alone, and I do choose that in some ways because it's a necessity. So yeah, I would
sometimes the campaigns driven by one individual who is passionate, and I can sense your passion as well. I'm sure people watching this will too, and that's so important. Our politicians don't seem to have any political passion, because they're not driven by anything other than their sense of power and obviously whoever has paid them off. So,
and they only get,
it's very, very refreshing, believe me.
Yeah, they only get to certain positions if if they're corruptible or bribable or compromisable or compromised. They only get, and I'm sorry, we talk about Kennedy. I used to have a lot of respect for Kennedy. I knew him quite well. He supported me a lot in 2020. I'm sorry. My integrity runs through everything that I do, and honesty and truth, and that's what matters. But we don't have the time to pussyfoot around people's sensitivities now and drip feed the facts into the masses and the truth. It has to be out there. I'm going hard, and that's quite symbolic on the day as well, because the people and the message that we're platforming and where we are, it matters. It matters a lot. So yeah, I've got no time now. I'm not running around and begging people to please just maybe think about it. No, don't do it. Don't sign up, because I won't be dragged into a tyrannical, technocratic, dystopian hell of a digital gulag because other people have blind faith and trust in a government that have lied to them repeatedly. And I'm sorry, they've done many, many worse things than that, but I don't know where this airs, so I don't want to say too much. I don't know. I don't want to overspeak. But I will not hold back on the 13th. And please come. We protest, we rally, we march. It's going to be an amazing day. And we've got lots in store for everyone. So I want people to know that they have more power than the people allegedly in power. And they're all puppets. The power lies with us. And we do not comply. And that's the first step. Non-compliance is just the first step.